Hey guys, welcome back. I am so glad that you're here. First of all, thank you so much for all of the comments and just helpful ideas from the last video that I posted. You have no idea how much that meant to me and how helpful your comments were. So thank you again. Okay, so one of the most asked questions was if I could share some of the books that we have used in our group time for the character development topics that we went through, which was one of the what I'd like to call fundamental factors or instrumental factors in our success of our homeschool career. So if you haven't watched the video that I'm talking about, make sure to go watch that. So today I'm just going to share with you the books that we've used just this past year because they have been really fantastic, to be quite honest. And not only that, but they're really the only ones that are fresh on my mind right now. So I'm going to share those with you, and I'm going to share them with you in the order that we went through them this year and talk a little bit about how we did those. And of course, I'll have the books linked down in the description below. Okay, so the first book that we used this year was this life skills book, Life Skills for Teens. First and foremost, there very well may be a much better book on life skills for teens out there. I just did a search on Amazon and came across this one. It just seemed super manageable. I looked at some of the sample pages and just was like, yeah, that's going to give us a really good blueprint for the topics that I want to go over with the boys. And that's essentially what I did is I used the chapters and sections in this book as a blueprint. So for the most part, we went completely through the book as it's written, but there were some topics that maybe I shifted gears a little bit as far as we talked about other things in regards to that overall chapter, mine and Bo's experience with different things that we've learned throughout our life and our experience, and just some other skill sets that maybe weren't mentioned in the book. But I needed some type of blueprint to go off of because I wanted the boys just to not leave our home and have no idea how to make a meal for themselves, how to read a recipe and follow the directions, how to correctly iron a shirt, right? Just little things that we kind of take for granted. I don't know about you, but for me, like there were so many things that when I moved out, I was like, oh, I've actually never really learned how to do this. And I never really was taught how to do this because, you know, my mom did it for me or my dad did it for me or whatever. Not that they intentionally didn't teach me, but just, you know, you just get in the routine of doing things and you forget that, or you don't realize that you didn't take the time to actually instruct your kids on how to learn how to do it for themselves. So I wanted to make sure that I did my due diligence as best as I could in taking this past year and just kind of slowing down and really taking the time to talk about just random life skills. Sometimes it was like, you know, they weren't sexy subjects. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't always something fun to talk about, like personal hygiene and such. But again, that's just things that maybe we just sometimes assume they know how to do and maybe they don't. So anyways, all that to say, I did use this life skills book as a blueprint. So how it's laid out is it has 13 sections, and going from food and kitchen to money and budgeting, behavioral skills, clothing, home maintenance, so many things. And then within those sections, there are different parts that are broken down into separate skills. So for example, if we look at section 10, clothing, we talked about doing the laundry, ironing clothing, folding clothes, how to tie a tie, cleaning your shoes, sewing a button, you know, just really good random life skills that, like I said, if I were just to sit down and try to make a list of all the things I want to teach them, I probably would have missed some of these. So to have this as a good blueprint was fantastic. So for example, when we got to ironing clothing, I was even able to take this part and show them how to not only iron your clothes using an iron and an ironing board, but also a steam. Because fun fact, I was last year years old. Oh, sorry. I thought that was on vibrate. I was last years old when I myself learned how to steam out a garment. Yes, you heard that correctly. So I took the opportunity, because now we have a steamer that we keep here, which we never had before. And I took the opportunity to show them how to do that myself, because you know, when you travel, sometimes some hotels I've found don't have an iron and ironing board. They only have a steamer. So just random little things like that. And so I did find this book really helpful for that. Like I said, really, you could probably go through this in like a month. We took the majority of the semester because, like I said, because we use it as a blueprint, when we got to some sections, I added in some things that I thought of, like, oh yeah, I also want you to know about this, and such things like that. So if you're looking for just an overall guide on life skills that you want to make sure that your kiddos have heard you talk about and have a decent understanding about it, I highly recommend this book for that. Okay, the next book we used was Atomic Habits. This is a very popular book now, and I'm sure that you are probably familiar with it. I read this book shortly after it was released, just before actually I opened my gym in 2018, and I used a lot of principles from this book as our mission statement for the gym. Specifically, the biggest thing that stuck out to me was the 1% better factor that he talks about. And if you're not familiar with it, he just talks about how habits are the compound interest of self-improvement, and just has a really fantastic chart explaining how the 1% better concept will add up for a positive effect over time. So you can see here in figure 1, it says the effects of small habits compound over time. For example, if you can get just 1% better each day, you'll end up with results that are nearly 37 times better after 1 year. So this book obviously is just about reshaping the way you think about progress, and it really gives you the tools and techniques that you need to transform your habits and learn how to develop good habits and eliminate the bad ones. I feel like I wanted to choose a book that would help the boys have awareness and develop skills that they would be able to take with them once they leave the house. Because while they're here, yes, I can manage them, I can help direct them, but once they get on their own, I want them to feel like they have the knowledge and are as equipped as they possibly can be to be able to make their own decisions, work through conflict, you know, all of those things. And so that was a huge reason why I chose Atomic Habits, because again, I had read it before and I know how powerful of a tool it was for me in not only how to create habits, but how to eliminate bad ones. Honestly, for me, that they go hand in hand. It is as equally important, in my opinion, to get rid of the bad habits that we form so easily over time, often that we don't even realize are bad habits, and then to replace those with good habits. And this book gives you easy, practical tools to be able to do that. So this is just a life skill that I wanted the boys to have awareness of and to be able to reference back to. They each have their own copy, so now we each have our own copy of this book, which was also another advantage, that they have their own that I encourage them to highlight, write in, you know, all the things, and they'll be able to take that with them whenever they do move out. That was a huge factor in why I chose Atomic Habits also. So when we went through this one, we took a few months. Also, I do want to mention, kind of side note here, this past school year, the boys did a university style co-op where they went to school or went to co-op for 2 full days out of the week. And so we school at home for 3 days out of the week. So keep that in mind also. If you're schooling at home with your kids 5 days out of the week, you will likely be able to go through some of these books. Like, my time frame and how we went through these books is probably a little bit more expanded than it would be for someone that is doing school at home for, like I said, 4 or 5 days out of the week. So keep that in mind when I go over how long it took, because you might be like, that little bitty book took you a whole semester. Yes, that's part of the reason why. So keep that in mind. Okay, so going back to Atomic Habits, when we went through this one, and this one I'm guessing took us about 2.5 to 3 months we took on this one. I had the boys read the chapters on their own as independent work for this. And then in our group time, we would discuss the chapter together. So I also bought a workbook to go along with this. Really kind of a waste of money. I ended up not using it. The questions really were just pretty obvious questions. I was hoping for maybe a more insightful perspective that I hadn't considered when reading the chapter, and I didn't really get that from the workbook. So I wouldn't recommend the workbook or a workbook, to be quite honest. The advantage I had when we went through this is that I had already read this previously. So I had a lot of highlights, markings, and such. I did briefly skim through the chapter before we talked about it again because it had been a few years since I've read it. It was very easy for us to have discussion around the chapters. I pretty much just kind of made up my own questions. I also just opened it up to just about every day I would ask them, what was your biggest takeaway that you got from the chapter? And then that often just led into discussion about what we read about. One thing that I loved about Atomic Habits is that it had a lot of formulas in it. You can also access the PDF files of those. So I had the boys download that, and we referenced the formulas a lot, which are just so practical and incredibly helpful just for everyday life. So highly recommend, even if you don't use this as a group time, if you haven't read Atomic Habits, highly recommend that you give this one a read. Okay, the next book and the last book that we use for our group work this year is House Habits. You guys, I cannot express to you how incredible this book is. I am a little biased because our friends and former pastors wrote this book. Philip Dees was also on top of being a friend and a former pastor, he was also a business coach for me when I had the gym for a short time. And the wisdom and tools that are in this book, I mean, you guys, incredible. Unfortunately, we didn't start this book until like a month and a half before we wrapped up school for this year. Otherwise, I would have 100% taken an entire semester with this book. I was very familiar with the house habits. There are 12 house habits that they write about here in the book. And I'm familiar with it because they are the house habits that they implemented at their church, which I was a part of for several years. So the habits were spoken about very often and taught on. And those habits and teachings truly molded me into such a better Christian mom, wife, friend. I mean, not stretching the truth here, like truly those house habits have done that for me. And not only that, but I took the mission statement and the core values from the house habits again into when I opened the gym and wanting to build what we would say at North Point, Christ-centered, culture-changing community. And that was my goal in opening the gym. Okay, so the book has 12 house habits. And when they would teach on these at the church, they would take one habit per month. Over the course of a year, they were able to teach on all 12 habits, which I thought was brilliant. But the habits are: we live on, we love big, we protect unity, we honor consistently, we lean in, we grow intentionally, we practice honesty, we embrace discipline, we lead out, we give generously, we cheer enthusiastically, and we stay on mission. And before they get into the habits, there's a fantastic introduction and then 2 chapters, one titled Mission Focused and one titled Habits Centered, that were very instrumental in reading and navigating through before starting the habits. And I say that because the mission focused one, we took a good amount of time on this one, and I had the boys write their own personal mission statements that I wanted them to take on as something that they would say to themselves every day and use as a foundation of who they are as an individual and as a godly young man. So we took a good amount of time brainstorming on these together. We worked together to figure out what the mission statements would be. We wanted to keep it simple. And so I'll share with you mine. Mine is to love, lead, and learn through Christ. That was one of the best things that we did using this book. I mean, knowing that they have their own personal mission statement, it just was such a beautiful thing to be able to help develop and have that time with them in developing it. It was just something that I will take with me truly for the rest of my life. So I'm going to share with you just a quick snippet from the chapter on mission focused. And this is Philip writing, and he says, "You cannot achieve your mission or any mission without the proper mindset. Long before Dr. Carol Dweck or Dr. Caroline Leaf made this idea famous, the Bible said to change your life by changing the way you think." That's from Romans 12:2. Having grown up connected to the think, be, do culture of Keith Craft and Elevate Church in Frisco, Texas, we knew that mindset was an important part of our personal faith journey. What we had not yet realized is that mindset would also be core to the evolution of our church culture as well. Leaders cannot be raised up in the greenhouses of faith. They must be given room to grow and explore and learn. And then lastly, he finishes the chapter saying, as you intentionally create your own family, church, organizational culture, choose house habits that help you make decisions in advance of conflict. As you will see, each of our house habits is tailored to cause us to think a certain way, act a certain way, and react a certain way. However, none of these habits are task-driven. Tasks, goals, and methods change. But if I have the right habits, I will be able to easily adapt and stay on mission. So good. So you guys, we talked about so many topics through this. It is incredibly applicable to anyone, anywhere. Another great thing about how they wrote this book is at the end, there's a part called Make It Personal, and it gives several questions for you to ask, which is exactly what we used to spark our conversations. So I didn't need anything else other than this book. That also helps me because, like I said, I had not read this book previously, whereas with Atomic Habits, I had read it. So this one we read together and I read it out loud, which took a little bit of time, but I only needed this book. I didn't need anything else to go with it. It is written really fantastically for a group setting and to have conversation. If I could recommend any book whatsoever that you start out with, or if you just had to choose one book to work through with your kiddos, I would do this one. It is so fantastic. Also, I really want to encourage you, if this is something new, like this whole concept of just going through like nonfiction books with your kids during a group time setting or whatever that would look like for you, I really want to encourage you to be as transparent as you feel like the Holy Spirit would lead you to be, because there have been really great times where I've been able to share some experiences that, my boys are 15 and 17, and so they are young men. And so we're now at a place where I'm able to share some life experiences that they can understand, they can relate to, they can learn from. And so I have been very willing to share many of my mistakes, some of them being when I was their age, some of them being last month, just full transparency. And another thing that we've been able to develop, I feel, through these conversations have been trust. And that has also been just such a beautiful thing to experience with them. So I would encourage you just to be transparent and be real with your kids and just help them to remember, like, you're human and we're still learning until we go to meet with the Lord. Like, we are continuously learning and we're going to make mistakes. And the key is, how are we going to react to them? Do we have the tools to react as best that we can? This book is gonna help you with that. And just, yeah, just being real and just helping them to understand, like, even as mature adults, we're still learning and evolving and trying to be the best version of ourselves that we can be. So if you can't tell, I'm in love with this book. You gotta get it. You gotta get it. It's so great. Okay, lastly, I do have 2 boys, so no girls. However, I did go through a book with a small group through my church recently that is specifically for women, and I wanted to share it with you because I thought it would be a fantastic tool if you have teenage girls that maybe you want to look for a book to go through with them, and that is Emboldened. This book I had never heard of before, and I gotta tell you, rocked my world. There were some principles in here and stories from scripture that I just never saw from another perspective the way that she writes about it. And I was just like, wow, you know, incredible. So let me read you, because the summary is going to better explain the book than what I could tell you. So the back of the book says, women are central to the mission of God, but many churches lack visible examples of women in ministry and leadership. Pastor Tara Beth Leach issues a stirring call for a new generation of women in ministry. God not only permits women to minister, God emboldens, empowers, and unleashes women to lead out of the fullness of who they are. The church cannot reach its full potential without women using their God-given gifts. Leach provides practical expertise for how women can find their place at the table, escape imposter syndrome, face opposition, mentor others, and much more. When women lead and when men partner to embolden the women in their lives, the church's imagination expands to better reflect God's story and hope for the world. And it did just that for me, you guys. Like, it gave me an empowerment and truly, like, not, it was a partnership of going through the book and then also being in the setting of my small group. But the Holy Spirit just, I felt an empowerment in working through this as a woman that I had never experienced before. I mean, truly, not being sarcastic in any way. My eyes were opened, and honestly, also there was like a sense of freedom that came in just learning more about how God sees me as a woman in ministry. And when I say ministry, not as having a position working at a church, but just ministering to others, ministering to my husband, to my kids, to my friends, to my family. Like, as a Christian, I believe I'm ministering always, right? To myself even. And so this just was very insightful. So I think it would be a fantastic book if you have teen girls to go through it, or even just for yourself if you are just maybe struggling with finding your identity, which is something that I have really been working on this past year. Might actually be a great video for me to make later. Yeah, but anyways, all that to say, Emboldened was a fantastic read for women, and I would highly recommend it for teen girls. They like randomly empty the trash bins outside of our apartment complex, and I like never know when they're gonna do it. And for whatever reason, it always seems to happen when I'm trying to make a video. So if you can hear that, I'm so sorry, but that's what's going on. Okay, that is all I have for you today. I hope that you found one or all of those books helpful. Again, they're gonna be linked down below. So if you have any other questions on any topics maybe that I did not mention regarding the books, let me know in the comments. I'll be more than happy to help you out as much as I can. Let me know if you plan to utilize any of those books, or if you have read any of them. I would love to know your thoughts. And yeah, until next time, you guys, I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you again in the next video. Bye.